if we want to speak about, the collective power of black people, well, what are you talking about? Do you mean the collective power of African people? You mean Pan-Africanism or then say African. I don't understand why people are so wedded to the term black. And the justification for it is, well, it's because the European made it negative. It's the Europeans' word. It was negative before it was applied to African people. It's like they're getting it backwards. It isn't that Europeans said we're going to make this word black negative in order to accommodate our desire to devalue African people or dark-complexioned Asian people or dark-complexioned Native Americans. That's not how it worked. The word black, right, absence of light, if you will, was supposed to be understood by any English speaker as largely negative before it was applied to people of African or Asian ancestry. Dr. Akbar, the prominent African-American psychologist, often talks about one of our issues is that we have become, we meaning people of the African world, whether it's the continent or more especially within the diaspora, so-called black folks, are very reactive rather than proactive, which means that if this individual is calling himself white, we're going to react and call ourselves black because we're the opposite. Not really understanding that we're not exactly taking a step in the right direction because now, as I like to say, given all the linguistic and cultural baggage of black, you are trying to push an elephant uphill on roller skates. You're trying to turn a negative into a positive when there's a clean, pure stream nearby to draw from. If you're referring to complexion, in fact, there's a famous scene in the movie Cry Freedom about the life of Steve Biko. The presumption is that this event actually occurred. If it didn't, it still made sense in terms of the screenwriters and Richard Attenborough putting it into the film. And that is, Steve Biko was in court. He's charged with basically, being seen as a threat to the apartheid system, and he was banned. So he's in court talking to the European judge, the Boer British judge, and the judge says to him,
"Why call yourselves black? I mean, you people are more brown than black."
And Biko says,
"Why do you call yourselves white? You people are more pink than white."
And the judge goes,
"Precisely."
But there's no deeper unpacking of what just occurred. And it raises an important question about systems of oppression. Why did Europeans decide to designate themselves as white? More specifically, English-speaking Europeans, because the term white is an English term. When you know why they chose the term, then you know what they sought to gain by it. When you also see that they leveled the term black against us, Asiatics, Africans, Asians, then you know what they sought to gain by imposing that on us. But why the need to fixate on black? There's the work of a Harvard psychologist who I believe is of East Indian ancestry. Her name is Dr. Banerjee. And her work on looking at the implicit association test, which is used by psychologists to look at implied bias or biases that exist, She recognizes what are often called mind bug, in fact, she coined the term mind bugs, which are culturally imposed perceptions of reality. And the dominant perception of reality for those of us who speak the English language is when you say black or use black, its dominant use is negative. Black magic, black night, black death, right? And to try to overcome that is very difficult. Now, this is a Harvard faculty member, psychologist, prominent psychologist, who's pointing this out, and she calls them the mind bugs. Now, part of what people can do, you could say, well, you need to get people to stop thinking of black as something negative. Okay, that's all right, but in the context of, do you want to fight that battle, or more importantly, should you be fighting that battle? Because you're still reducing yourself again to your pigment, and you're not looking at yourself in the context of a larger history. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to speak of we as highly melanated people, or we as NUC, or we as I would say, people of predominant African ancestry, that makes more sense to me. I'm just saying. So when I looked at what Drew Ali was trying to convey, and did convey, obviously, to those who heard what he was saying, back in the early teens and 1920s in particular, that you are not black, you are not Negro, you are not colored. Just on a psychological level, I can see the value. I haven't even gotten into what the value and importance of what he was saying by having folks reject calling themselves Negro, black, or colored, because that's a whole nother issue. I just got into the psychology of it, right? That's why people, confuse. I've often thought of this. You have a child reading about the Black Night and the Black Death and the Black Plague, and then the child goes, oh, and I'm a black child. What Benaji and others, Eric Heyman, who's another social psychologist who's talked about this issue of implicit bias and its roots not in the individual mind. Part of the perspective on this is many psychologists are now trying to figure out why is it that police tend to shoot quote unquote black men at the rates that they do. And is it because the individual police officer is overtly racist? And what some of this psychology is now suggesting is it may not be a sense of overt racism, but rather the culturally imposed racism, what people used to call national character, how nations see themselves as a result of their particular histories and experiences. So, like I said, Drew Ali, just in terms of saying you're not Negro, black, and colored, was getting people out from under that weight of the negativity associated with blackness. And for people who say, well, it's better, the same person would not allow you to call him a Negro. But with all due respect, Negro is the same thing as black. If I'm speaking Spanish, it's negro. I'm going to call you Negro, right? So it doesn't make any sense. Yet, again, more is a reference to a people, to an empire that covered a geographical location. The Moorish Empire at one time was from the northwestern part of the Maghreb or North Africa all the way down to the Senegal River and as far east as the border of Egypt. That's part of what, and I'm just talking about what we know as the recognized Moorish Empire in terms of international and diplomatic history and relations. So we can say that covers a wide swath of the African continent. That would include Africans of various hues, people who would be darker in complexion and others who'd be lighter in complexion. And the primary sources from Duarte, Portuguese travelers, and Azrara and English sources all affirm that the term Moor was used for people of African ancestry. Later, the term blackamoor is introduced, but it's part of the development of the kind of pigmentocracy direction that exists. Within the English language, just as in other languages, there are different ways to translate something more accurately. So, and one of the examples I've often used is the difference in Spanish. If you're speaking of knowing someone versus knowing something, you don't use the same verb. Conocer and saber is not the same thing, right? One means to know a person, one means to know about something. By the same token, if you translate Moor to simply mean black, knowing that black in the English language is affiliated with so much negativity, long before it was ever referenced for people of African, or I dare say Indian ancestry, because a lot of people seem to be under the impression that black was only used to refer to people of Africa, and that's not true. Black was, and in some cases, is still used to refer to people of Asia by Europeans. My first trip to England, and I was talking to people from Indonesia and Pakistan and Cambodia and different parts of Southeast Asia, and they were bringing to my attention how you can read articles in the paper, and this is in the early 90s, where they would talk about a black person doing something. Usually it might have been affiliated with some criminal act, unfortunately, which was part of their point at the time. But they were saying that the term was used to encompass them. And there was a debate between the younger generation of these people from Southeast Asia saying, well, we'll use the word black. I mean, people in the Americas have a black pride movement, and you know, there was black consciousness in South Africa. And then there were those who were elders who were averse to it. They didn't like it because they said, you don't want to be encapsulated simply in a color, because now the emphasis is simply on your color and not on your culture. So they said, well, they saw the value of, meaning the young people saw the value of trying to use a new hip kind of term, if you will. But the elders said no, because what that's doing is reducing your value, because in the English language, black is largely associated with a bunch of negativity. And just like Richard B. Moore said in his book from the 60s, the term or the word Negro, its origin and evil use, he made the same argument. Why you shouldn't use the term Negro? Well, guess what? Negro is Spanish for black. So folks went from Negro in Espanol to black in English, but it's still the same thing. And I literally mean thing. So defining yourself by an ethnicity or a nationality clearly would make more sense. And when the late, great political scientist Ali Mazrui, who was known for doing a series back in the 80s on Africa, he was Kenyan born. He actually said, black people are the only group in the United States that is designated racially as opposed to geographically, right? Or nationally. And this is part of the problem, right? You have, and that's why I've said to people all the time, why don't we speak of yellow Americans, right? If we're going to use the color nomenclature, use it across the board. Just use it all the time. But if someone will say, well, I'm Irish, I'm German, I'm black, and they're running through their lineage, and I'm going, all right, Germans come from Germany, the Irish come from Ireland, black, what is that? At least, well, I don't, because we don't know where we're from. You can at least say Africa. At least say Africa, right? At least say African. I know I have some African answers. And now in this day and age, you can even do an Ancestry.com test. And They can tell you, right, what part of Africa, what ethnic group or nation or so-called tribe one is from, right? So the value of not identifying with Black is it compels you to be more specific in identifying culture, knowing your geographic origin, knowing your history.
Don't worry, you don't need to memorize everything from this chapter. You can click on the link in the description below and download the study notes for this chapter for free. Using the exact notes from this video will definitely elevate your own studies. Also, be sure to subscribe to Amexem and hit the notification bell for more videos and resources just like this one. We'll see you in the next video. Peace and love.